Hello and welcome to Cheshire Audio. Now this is going to be another retro review. This is two I've done this week, after saying I've hardly done any of these. And what we're going to look at today is the Linn Basik Turntable, which you would have just seen. I've just literally just done it. A video of how to check tone arm bearings. This is the same turntable, so I'll talk more about that in a sec actually, because there's a bit more to talk about. So this is retro review stroke buyer's guide for that reason, I think, really. The Basik has been around a long time, actually. I mean, it was produced in about 1990, I would guess. I'm not quite sure how long it obviously it was finished years ago, but I can't actually think how long they produced it for. I got the impression with the Basik turntable that they didn't make any money on them. I think it was a bit of a lost leader, really. I mean, initially, obviously, back in the early 70s, would it be 71, 72? The original Sondek became very successful, and there was modifications to it, improvements, extra power supplies. And then late 80s, we got the Linn Axis, which was like an unsuspended version, or at least it didn't have 3-point suspension with springs. It was 3 sort of compressible feet that everything sat on, with almost like a rubber. What would you call it? Like a rubber bellows that the 3 feet sat on, and it acted as suspension. The Axis was very complex electronically as well, which is causing a few problems nowadays. They're actually quite difficult to repair, or I should say quite expensive to repair, because quite often you have to replace the main circuit board in them. A lot more complex than a Sondek internally. They had like a hot start. Very clever actually, the Axis. The Axis, when you start them up, feeds a high voltage to the motor for a few seconds until it gets up to speed. And once it gets to speed, and it knows it's got to speed, it then drops the torque, drops the voltage, so it drops the torque right down and makes the motor goes quiet, which is really clever, but that's the thing that tends to go wrong with them. The Basik came out in about, like I said, about 1990, a much simpler deck altogether, really, and that just had 3 standard feet, a bit like a Riga 3. The plinth was chipboard plinth. I mean, Riga's by this time had gone on to MDF, because they'd started on chipboard, ended up on MDF with a laminate, which is a much more rigid design, I suppose. But like the Riga, came with a very good tone arm. It came with an Akito, which, from my memory of the Akito, it was better than the very first Linn Itok arms. If you compare it to an Akito, there was nothing in it really, and it was somewhat at the time. It was a somewhat cheaper arm. Not now. The Akitos go for a lot of money now. So yeah. Anyway, so let's have a look at it. It's in a bit of a sad state, this one, but it's like I think if you saw the tone arm bearing video, major faults with this. But it's a customer is clearing a house, and he found it amongst a load of stuff of a friend of his, and it's in a bit of a sad state. But anyway. A good subject to look at, though. It's a good subject to look at. So I'll turn the camera around and we'll have a proper look at it. There we are, one Linn Basik turntable. I'll take the lid off in a sec actually, so you can get a better view of it really. But you probably can't see this on the screen here, but the lid has definitely got a bit of a nicotine sort of tint to it, really. I think the chap must have been a pretty heavy smoker, really, and I think some of its problems have sort of stemmed from that, really. Right, so I'll take the lid off, so I can do this with one hand, because it's not as easy as it should be. Because this is standard fault number 1 with anything Linn. Oops. Is the lid's not staying. Basically, the springs have gone on the hinges. That is really common, actually. They seem to last about 10 to 15 years. The hinges on Linns. And people criticise. It's funny that people really have a thing about Riga planar lid hinges, because it's just a folded piece of plastic. They last 40 years, unless you drop the deck, in which case it's the first point that breaks, and I suppose it stops you breaking the lid. Linn hinges are renowned for not lasting very long. So I'll just lift out, put that down to the side. I'll take one of the hinges off to show you. So what they tend to do is, I don't know if you can see that. The spring has actually burst out the back of the moulding there. It's cracked down the side, and that part of the spring which would normally be under pressure to hold it up is completely sort of a bit like something out of the film Alien. sort of burst out to the back of it, and they've both done the same thing. And these hinges are sort of, you can see them on eBay, about 30 quid a set, 40 quid a set, something like that. Seems expensive, quite a complex thing though, to be fair, so you sort of understand the pricing of them. But yeah, pretty well standard that. Usually one or both of the hinges will have failed. I've got a bit of a downer on Linn, I've not at all. This is a really good turntable, I must admit. I really liked the Basic when it came out. And I would probably say, at the time, the Linn Basik deck was probably better than the equivalent Riga 3. I think it had a little bit more sort of clarity and bounce to it than the Planer 3 did. If you compare it to a modern Planer 3, I think it sort of probably would sit between Planer 2, Planer 3 now. So it's still up there, it's still a good deck really. And there's quite a few sort of key components on this which are very similar to the Son deck, so it is a sort of a simplified Son deck. I've got the key toe there, really good tone arm, as I said. The one on this one, if you want to go back and watch the arm, but I'm not going to demonstrate it now, but the bearings on this are shot totally, vertically and horizontally. They're both gone. That was, again, I talk about the reasons why that's like that in that video. Is if you're thinking of buying a second-hand Linn deck with a Linn tone arm on it, always check the bearings. I mean, it's not, like I think I said in the other video, it's not a design issue particularly, it's a user thing, where they're quite easy to damage. And if you're careful, they're fine, but if you, yeah, like I say, watch the other video and I sort of explain it in there really. But yeah, superb tone arm, and the feet are quite spongy on this. You can just about make them out, quite substantial big rubber feet underneath. So you get quite a bit of sort of isolation there. A lighter version of the platter. The Son deck platter is, I can't remember the weight of it now, about £9 I think. The Basic platter is a bit more like perhaps an Akito platter, which is like a Mazak material, so it's quite, it rings a little bit, but when you put everything together it's quite dead. And they don't have the metal sort of alloy, well it'll be Mazak, won't it? It's sub platter on these. They have it feels a bit more like an acrylic than a plastic, to be honest. I'm not sure, perhaps it's plastic, but plastic pulley. Again, like a Riga, probably the reason for using that, I mean, there'll be price constraints really with a deck like this, but also it does act as a bit of a barrier between any resonance within this structure getting to the platter and then through the stylus. So actually, although it seems like it's cutting corners price-wise, this is probably helping the sound quality over a sort of alloy hub or whatever would do. The drawback with this sort of hub is they're not quite as accurate probably, so your speed consistency is probably not quite as good as an alloy one, but it stops transmission of noise through better, so it's sort of acting as a bit of a buffer between platter and plinth. So it kind of helps the deck in a way. Main bearing on this I think is similar to an Axis, motor same as Son deck and Axis. Riga actually, in fact, they all use very similar motors, if not the same motors in some situations. On-off switch on these is underneath, and there's no light to tell you it's on, so it's a bit of a, obviously you can tell when it's spinning, but that's it really. You believe it or not, I actually dusted this before I did the video, and it's definitely got an aroma of nicotine about it. So yeah, it was a good deck. I mean, like I say, probably preferable to a Riga in its day. Not a lot. No, it's not a lot better actually. I think the Riga was a warmer sounding deck than this. I think the one thing about the Basic was it did sound a little bit lightweight, very clean and pacey, but a bit lightweight. Whereas the Riga had a bit more of a sort of a consistency across the range, really. Probably better with the tone arms got better definition and in a lot of respects is a better tone arm, the RB300, but it's almost horses for courses. It depended what people were sort of looking for in a deck, really. But I must admit that when it came out, I really liked the Basic. I thought it offered a lot. So yeah, and standard, like I always say, felt mats are the best. So yeah, that's the Linn Basik. So very quick video on this. I think the chap who owns it is going to, the chap who's dealing with it is going to come and collect it shortly. So I'm just thought I'd do a quick video on it. Just a little sticker there, which you won't be able to see probably. Just showing on off underneath. I wish other decks would do that, because there's quite a few decks out there. I've got hidden switches and you can never find them. So yeah, that's it. That's the Linn Basik. Like I say, I wouldn't dismiss the idea of buying one of these second hand, but I think you just need to have a look, check the hinges are okay, check the toe arm bearings. Not a lot else to go wrong, to be fair. I mean, they're probably probably a safer purchase than something like a Linn Axis, because like I say, the electronics on those can be expensive to fix. If the arm bearings have had it on this, that's expensive to fix if you can have it fixed at all, because I'm not sure that Linn still sort these out now. Linn are a bit strange in that respect, that they don't necessarily look after products after a certain time. I think toenails might be different. Certainly electronics, I think they have a 10-year cut-off point. So yeah, so you have to take that into account really. But if you can find a good one, one that's not had a lot of use or has been sort of really carefully looked after it through its life, they're going to be a good buy, these, because it is a really nice punchy deck. Yeah, so that's it. Let's turn the camera around. Yeah, so that's the Linn Basik Turntable, and hopefully this doesn't seem as though it's been really rushed. In fact, I was feeling a bit out of breath now, because the chap, like I say, the chap's going to come and collect this any time, so I just thought I'd just get this video out quickly, because it's an interesting turntable, sort of a favourite of mine around that period. I did really like it, and like I've just said, probably a better buy, as long as you check those key things about it, really. This one's got the added feature that I didn't actually put it on to show this, but the motor sounds like, if you've ever heard a Perkins diesel in a canal boat, it's really got a sort of the sort of sound going on, which might be sortable, because quite often they have a little, I can't remember whether the Basics has this like the Sondex do, but they have a little thrust plate on the bottom of the motor, and sometimes they become misaligned, and if you tweak them, you can quieten it off. You have to take them apart and rejig everything inside and put it back on again. I could do with doing a video on that, actually, because it's not so much common now, but when Sondex were a new thing, it was quite common for the little pressure plate thing just to become misaligned. Later ones don't have the same system on them at all, but I think the Basic is of that era, so it might well have the same little plastic ball bearing on the bottom. But that could be all that's going on with the motor, because the motors are fairly well indestructible. So yeah, that's it. I'll, like I say, a bit of a rush this one. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you in a future video. Thank you very much.